Welcome to the Elliott Confidential Podcast. I'm Christopher Elliott. I'm a consumer advocate and journalist. I'm here with Aaron Elliott, my son. Hey, Aaron.
Hello.
And we are in Sydney, Australia.
Yes, we are, and we're having a blast here. It has been quite a February. If you don't know, February is like late summer,
The middle
fall.
of summer, yes.
Yeah, more or less.
Well, it's like, August in the Northern Hemisphere. So it's very hot, and then you have a couple of cool days where it feels like fall is almost in the air.
Yeah. Well, we've been here for almost 3 weeks now. We got here on the 3rd. So it's been 19 days.
Yeah, okay, let's do the lightning round. Places that we've been. But before we go there, we have to talk about mass transit here because it's pretty awesome.
Yes.
We landed here and we got on the Sydney Metro, and I was shocked by how easy it was to use. You just basically tap your credit card and you walk on, and the fares are really reasonable, but you can get anywhere on mass transit. And that leads us to this week's question, which is...
The question is, where has been the best mass transit you have ever used? Let us know the cleanest buses, trains, planes, boats, ferries.
Planes? Mass transit?
No, that's not.
I guess that is
it
kind of mass transit, yes.
Let us know
Yes.
in the comments.
Do we have any favorites besides Sydney?
Qatar.
Qatar is good.
Switzerland.
Switzerland is good. Zürich, yeah.
Yeah.
Where it's just like...
Germany.
You can go anywhere and it gets you there fast and it doesn't cost that much money.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's the thing with mass transit is that sometimes they just overcharge you and then people don't want to use it. Or it's dangerous too. I mean, like LA, for example.
True that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although LA is getting better, I think.
So
I'm told. Okay, lightning round, as promised. We have been all kinds of places. First place we went to was the Sydney Opera House.
yes.
And we did a sustainability tour because I'm writing a story about sustainability. But, we'll go through all the places we've been to. We've done an Aboriginal tour of Sydney, which was fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been out to Newton, which has some of the very best restaurants in all of Australia, especially if you like plant-based food. It's all there. We've also gone to the Museum of Modern, not the Museum of Modern Art. It's the gallery, the NSW Gallery. Mm-hmm. New South Wales.
Yep.
Not safe for work. and hung out and saw all the parks, the botanical garden. That we've been walking in the botanical garden every single day.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned the weather, though, so we should talk about that because people think they come to a place like Sydney from a Northern Hemisphere destination and they think it's going to be cool, but it is definitely not. It's the Southern Hemisphere, so it is summertime. So what is it like here, Aaron?
Well, right now it is humid and cool. And it's been that way for the past week or so. Unfortunately, when we got here, they were going through what they considered oppressive heat.
A heat wave,
which
yes.
I guess for most British people would be oppressive. It was much like what we experienced when we were in London many years ago.
Oh, that's right, when we did have an
Yes.
actual heat wave. Yeah, people here are, there's no air conditioning. We're living in an Airbnb that has no AC at all. So the first couple of weeks were difficult. Like week 1 and 2, we were not comfortable. But then things got much better. The weather cooled off, and now it feels pretty good, actually.
Yeah, feels nice. You can open a window. It's a little bit humid, but
Yeah.
nothing compared to, I don't know, Brazil or
No.
other,
Brazil is...
the Caribbean.
Yeah.
No.
And we were there in Brazil about a year ago, so it's we've been thinking about that a lot, but it's nowhere near as humid as the Caribbean. So something to be aware of if you come to Sydney, that you will have cooler weather in February and March, but if you go in like December and January, you may need air conditioning in wherever you go. So most of the hotels do have AC.
Huh.
So some of the places that we've been, I mentioned the Opera House. The Opera House is like the thing here, right? You walk across the bridge. Like we live in North Sydney, and so we walk across that bridge, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, every day, and we see the Opera House. What are we looking at when we see the Opera House?
Well, I think that it's really important to say that the Opera House is the center attraction.
Yeah.
When you live along the Sydney Harbour, which northern Sydney is right, the only thing that divides Sydney and northern Sydney is that harbor.
Right.
You get a really great view, and the bridge is a wonderful place to take photos. Unfortunately, it's not unobstructed views, but with a good camera, you can get
yes, you can just stick your lens right through that and
right
get a
through
good
the
shot.
guardrails.
Right,
Yeah.
and then you can lose your camera too.
Yeah. Well, that's why you need a strap.
That's right. Always bring a strap. Good point. But you look down and you see this area. Well, you see the Sydney Opera House, and then there's like this area where the ferries leave, and there's one dock for an enormous cruise ship. There's usually like a huge cruise ship there, and all the tourists go there. Like I have never seen so many tourists in my entire life.
Yes. Well, Sydney Harbour, where southern Sydney, the southern part, not northern Sydney, is just filled to the brim with tourists. You have the ferry port filled to the brim, Opera House.
Right, that's what I was looking for, is the ferry port. That's right next to the Opera House.
Now, if you go south of that, there are malls, there's the CBD area.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting stuff there.
The Victoria Mall is actually pretty interesting because it's an old kind of, it looks like it's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But it's classic.
Well, you have the Victoria Mall, you also have the Westfield Mall.
Sensory overload mall, we
call it the hyperstimulation mall. So lots of malls. You have also over there, if you go east of the Opera House, you reach the Botanical Gardens, and south of the Botanical Gardens, there is the New South Wales Art Gallery, which is very good, and it is very free of charge for entry.
Yes.
Yes.
And
except for some exhibits, which is a pretty common model nowadays.
One thing that people don't do when they go to Sydney is they just go in that port area and they walk around to all the gift shops and maybe buy a didgeridoo or something like that. But if you continue walking along the port or along the harbor, and then you get to the Botanical Gardens, and the crowds thin out, and suddenly you're in a beautiful area, and there's lots of beautiful plants and things like that.
Yeah. Botanical Gardens is 100% a must-see.
Absolutely. If I had only one day to spend in Sydney, I would go to the Botanical Gardens, and then I probably would go get lunch in Newtown, or Newtown, I've heard it pronounced both ways, because the food there is really excellent. And I would probably skip the shopping, but a lot of people like going shopping. The nice thing about Sydney is that the museums, by and large, are free. They're included in your stay. And so if you like art, we haven't checked out the Museum of Modern Art. That was something that's been on my mind, and I definitely want to look at that before I go. But the NSW Gallery is great. There's something interesting. There's an exhibit now, so if you go, that uses a lot of curry. I've never been to a museum that uses spices. But you walk in and you're like, oh, there must be an Indian restaurant here. But no.
No. It's interesting. So there's a Brazilian artist. I think his name is Felipe Neto or something like that. But anyway, basically, the exhibit, which I guess they've been redoing for several years now, since 2006 it's been around, is they basically take ultra stretchy spandex socks and then they just load it with all sorts of spices that you normally have in curry: turmeric, cinnamon, coriander, clove, things like that, fenugreek, and it makes the whole museum smell like curry. And
the whole museum.
The
entire, it's a huge museum. They just built it. It's like 2023, I want to say they finished it, but it's huge, and the whole museum smells like curry.
Yeah,
and other spices.
It does.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the lifestyle being here. Since we've been here for 19 days, we've gotten into a bit of a rhythm. You know, there are certain things that we're looking for, certain things that we're not. What's the lifestyle like here?
Well, you know, every day we get up, do our work, and then in the early morning, like between 8 and 9, we'll go and walk across the bridge to the CBD area of Sydney, and then we'll walk into the Botanical Gardens. We have a couple of different paths that we like to take, but Sydney is very much two cities, in the sense that you have the CBD area that has all the tourists in it, and you have North Sydney, which is, you have schools and regular neighborhoods and grocery stores. So in the morning, we like to go walking down to the more touristy areas, and then in the afternoon, we take a second walk out into the neighborhoods and buying food at the grocery store, that kind of thing. One of the really cool things, actually, I wanted to mention about mass transit is that Australians don't see train stations necessarily as just train stations. They see them as also shopping areas. So you can see when they're building some new metro stations, they're actually thinking of it in the same way that the Japanese think of it. You know, when you go to Tokyo and you go down into the subway there, and it's all these
retail space.
It's lots of retail space, but also really good retail space. Like our closest metro stop has a kind of a mall-like area.
2 grocery stores.
With really great grocery stores and one specialty store, which I like to call the Trap, which has all of the really delicious, like...
imported goods.
Yes, really good imported goods. Let's just leave it at that. So that's the lifestyle. What do you think of the lifestyle here?
Well, you know, I think that there's a lot of stuff that living in northern Sydney has. It's things that I don't think we've actually mentioned in previous podcasts, even though we've been in Australia, is there's a lot of schools, and because there's so many schools in northern Sydney, you get to see like what all their uniforms are.
Oh,
like,
yes.
Whenever you walk in the afternoon,
It's fascinating.
all the bus stops, all of the trains are just crowded with students, and they're all wearing these hats, these dresses.
Yeah.
And it's like, you wouldn't expect it in a place like Australia, because I think, you know, in the United States, wearing a uniform to school is something so, you know, you don't do it very much. People sort of just wear whatever they wanted to. But here,
Aaron, you wore a school uniform when you were going to St. Luke's back in Oviedo.
The old days, yes.
Yes, you did. But it's nothing like the uniforms that they wear here. They have these straw hats that they wear, and
it's like they're dressing up.
Yes, and ties. Even the girls have ties. I think it's fascinating to watch.
I think I wanted to go to the question that we asked in the beginning of this podcast, which was, what was the best mass transit?
Oh, yeah.
That you've experienced?
Actually, yeah, I'd love to talk about that a little bit, because we've stayed in so many places where we've had great... You know, I grew up in Vienna, Austria, and when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, they were building up their mass transit in a big way. So they had just added a new U-Bahn, which is the subway, and they built it out so much since I lived there. I love being in a large urban environment where you have mass transit. And I think that what's so fascinating is to see that in the United States, there are a lot of cities that are trying to do the same thing now, where they realize that, you know, you can't have gridlock all the time. You can't have cars on the road. You need to take some of these cars off the road and maybe get a light rail or a subway or something like that. I mean, but probably my all-time favorite, really, when it comes to mass transit is Tokyo.
Yeah, I think Tokyo is really one of those cities where they really outdid themselves with mass transit. Japan is a great city for mass transit. Country for mass transit, because you can take a Shinkansen to really basically any city.
Yeah.
You can take a Shinkansen from the very southernmost part of the
That's
island
the bullet
to
train.
even to the very north.
They just opened a new line too.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's just amazing.
No, the bullet train is amazing, and you know, I really enjoyed my time there. I mean, it's still unfortunate that the last time we were there, the payment system and the ability to pay for tickets was confusing. It was very Japanese.
Based on cash, right?
Yeah. Luckily, 7-Eleven is a good bank that doesn't really doesn't have a lot of fees.
Yes.
But otherwise, it still is a little bit of a kerfuffle in order to pay for those tickets in order to use the mass transit system. So
absolutely.
I'm hoping that they make some updates, but I don't know when that will happen.
In our last podcast, which came to you from New Zealand, we asked, what's the most dangerous flight you've ever been on? And the reason that we asked that was that planes were falling out of the sky. what's so interesting is that in the time between that podcast and this one, we've had even more accidents. We've had actually 2 more major air travel incidents, including the one in Toronto where the plane was landing and flipped over. So we had a lot of interesting responses to that one. David says, I think my wife has a death wish. She's hiked all over the world and wanted me to accompany her to Nepal. To hike the mountains in Nepal, we had to fly to Kathmandu, from Kathmandu to Luka. We had a group from all over the United States and people from many occupations. My wife and I are pharmacists, but there were 2 physicians, a father and daughter, and many other occupations were represented. So it's a lengthy comment here from David, but he talks about the problems with the runway, and one of the people on the trip was an airline captain, and he said that the runway was too short, but fortunately they did land. So anyway, David, thank you for sharing a comment. Sheila says, my husband and I were in Australia. We were catching a plane to go to Bungles, and it was a mail plane, a 12-seater. We took off, and while we were taking off, the engine caught fire. Anyway, she survived that one. Thanks for sharing that comment, Sheila. Never a good thing when the engine catches fire. Ray Barb says, I flew Kathmandu to Lukla and had the same experience as David. I was also in an Air New Zealand flight from Auckland to LAX. About 3 hours into the flight, we were told that we had to return to Auckland for a mechanical problem. After worrying about that, as we headed back to Auckland, we found later that it was a windshield wiper problem. Because of our... Aaron, have you ever been on a flight where you felt you had a close call? You know, you were saying your final prayers?
No, I mean, there was one a long time ago. I think it was, we were over Texas.
I remember that one. Yeah.
I forget from where, but I knew it was to Orlando. And yeah, that was not a fun flight.
It was Houston to Orlando, and we were we were getting shaken and stirred and all that. It was terrible. I was on a flight one time from New York to Frankfurt, and we were over Greenland. And you know when you look down and you see nothing but ice, and you go, okay, if this plane crashes, they're never going to find us. And we hit turbulence. The turbulence was so bad that I could see the wings bending. It looked like they were undulating, and we were losing altitude. And I thought, this is it. We're all going to die. I literally thought we were all going to die. And I was saying my last prayers. I was like, God, please. I'm too young to die. Anyway, we survived that one, you know? I mean, that was the nice thing. In today's environment, though, where we've had so many aviation accidents, I just don't even know anymore, though. Every time I get on a plane, I hope for a safe flight and a safe landing, you know?
Well, I mean, the good news is that flying is relatively safe.
It's very safe.
One of the safest modes of transportation. I mean, maybe safer would be train. I was
going to say, on that happy note, trains are not as safe as flying. Flying is still the safest mode of transportation.
That's crazy.
It's just that lately we've had had bad luck, that's all.
But, you know, Nepal...
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have my skepticisms.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the only way of getting to some of those places is by flying. Otherwise, you have to go down, you don't see those roads. You know the ones that you see on Facebook where it's like, it's one lane and it's a cliff and there's a car trying to, like a truck trying to negotiate a turn. Ugh.
No, I've seen those videos of, it's rural Southeast Asia. So not Southeast Asia, but rural Southeast Asia. And it's like mud roads. And there's a cliff on either side, or not on either side, but usually on one side.
Right, that's a good one.
There's a cliff on either side.
Yeah.
There's a cliff on one side, and they're negotiating with like mopeds, and they're slipping and sliding around and sloshing.
Yeah, I like the one where you see the car and it's like half of the car is off the cliff, and you're going.
It's a bus.
Those people are crazy. Yeah, that's why you fly, because you don't want to have to deal with those roads. We are off to, what's our next destination?
Next destination is Northern Territory. We're going to go to Uluru.
Yeah. Okay, and we'll be reporting from there. Anyway, have a great week, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate it, and we'll see you later.
Take care.